Hi, welcome. Welcome to my channel. Gonna start by introducing myself again. My name is John Bosco, and you can call me JB as my friends used to call me. Whatever works for you, call me JB, call me John Bosco. That's fine. If this is the first time of visiting my website or visiting my channel, welcome. If this is your returning subscriber, thank you for visiting me again. If you're first time, please, I would encourage you to like, subscribe, and share the contents with your friends, family, colleagues who have heard about Scrum and Agile, who are new to Scrum and Agile. All right. So over the times, I've started, discussing issues about Scrum and Agile in general and Scrum in particular, the do's and don'ts, what Agile is all about and what Agile is not. So today we are going to take a different turn. On this channel, I try as much as I can, not just to explain to you, but also to show you, not just to tell you, but also to show you at the same time. My contents as a result of my experience as a Scrum Master, my research, and then my discussion investigation. So today I am going to walk us through about some terminologies, some concepts that are so popular in an agile environment or among Scrum team members. So for those who are not sure about what Scrum is all about, or what Agile is all about, so today you're going to have some idea about what it's all about. All right, so that's a little bit background on that. So I'm going to share my screen and then we can get started right away. Okay, so I would assume that you are all seeing my screen because I am doing this presentation or doing this broadcast using Microsoft Word. So just try as much as I can to make it more lively. I'm not using a PowerPoint. Okay, so I'm going to enlarge, make it a little bit bolder and a little bit more brighter so that you can follow along. So today, like I said, we're going to look at some Agile Scrum terminologies, familiarizing yourself with some concepts used by Agile Scrum team. Because I realized that in the course of working with team members or teaching my students, I mean, sometimes people ask questions like, what is this? What is that? So because we are still on the early stage for this channel, so I want to try as much as I can to make everything as clear and then as more understandable to everybody. All right, so um, I'm going to make this PowerPoint again available, and then feel free to reach out if you have any question or if you want to talk or have more conversation on each of these concepts. I have over 126 compiled concepts. So today I'm not going to go with you on each of those. So we try as much as I can to work within time frame. Whatever we start today, we'll continue next time. Okay, so the first one is what is called acceptance criteria. It is the external criteria characteristics specified by the PO from a business or stakeholder perspective. It is used to determine whether a product item has been successfully developed. Okay, so what does that mean? In the case where a team or Scrum team, before they start the actual sprints, they have to go through a checklist, right? The PO has to be able to explain, this is what we are going to work on, or this is the user story we're going to, or this is the task, or this is a team or feature. And then they're going to look at a checklist in order to pull that item or that requirement from the product backlog to the sprint backlog before they can start working on that. So that's what it means by acceptance criteria. Just as the name suggests, in order to accept this, this is the criteria or the checklist it has to follow. Okay, so the second one is acceptance tests. The testing carried out to verify that the acceptance criteria has been met is quite so easily and literally understandable. It's tied to the acceptance criteria. Acceptance test-driven development. It is a technique in which the participants collaboratively discuss acceptance criteria using examples and then distill them into a set of concrete acceptance steps before development begins. So this happens again during the sprint planning, or it could happen during the backlog refinement time, where the development team has to really go through the items in order to make sure that it really fits or aligns with the acceptance criteria. Okay, so in Scrum or in Agile, you heard about activity, activity, activity. What does it mean when you hear that? It could have two meanings. The first is a Scrum practice that involves taking action or performing a process. For example, sprint planning, daily stand-up, etc. We have different ceremonies, different activities that happen in an Agile or Scrum. Those activities are what Scrum team members use to before they can start executing the sprints. The second one is generally it is the work performed by the Scrum team member, that is developers, such as writing code, testing. The actual work that the developers do is also called activity. Adaptation. Adaptation is such a common word in an Agile or Scrum. It means it's one of the three pillars of Scrum. You have adaptation, inspection, and transparency. Team uses feedback to make adjustments to the work producing, being developed, or the process by which they develop. So adaptation, in other words, at some point in time, there might be a requirement change. So the team members can, be flexible just to wiggle things around. Or if there is any feedback from the clients, they can always, just loop in the feedback in the next sprint. Okay, the next one is Agile. So Agile. What is Agile? Okay, so I've made a video on what Agile is. So if you haven't, watched my first video, please go back where I talked about the mechanics of Scrum, part 1. I try to highlight what Agile is in contrast to Waterfall. But just to give us an overview about what Agile is an umbrella term used for approach to software development, right? So we have two methodologies to project management. The first one is Waterfall. The second one is Agile, right? So, but in this context, Agile is an umbrella term. That is why when you hear something like Scrum is a framework, it's an Agile framework. So Agile is like umbrella where that houses all other frameworks like Scrum, Kanban, Extreme Programming. All right, the seventh one is all at once product development. It means doing all types of work, analysis, design, coding, integrating, and testing within a single iteration. So you do remember that in a waterfall environment, things are done in a sequential format. You first of all do the gathering requirements, you do the designing, you do the actual work, and then you do the maintenance, and then so this is a sequential approach. But in Scrum, everything happens at the same time. As the developers are writing the code, the tester is also doing the test. So that's what it means, all at once product development. All right, artifact. Artifact, you could hear things like what is a Scrum artifact, right? So for example, things like product backlog, sprint backlog, increment. These are the Scrum artifacts. But what actually is an artifact? Artifact is a tangible byproduct produced during product development. So in the case where the team members are working or during the execution of the sprints, right, there are byproducts that do happen or do come up at that point in time. You have like the sprint backlog, the product backlog, and then the increment. By increments, we mean like the potential value that they are going to ship to the clients. All right, Boy Scout rule. So in the course, been a Scrum Master for some time now. There are kind of techniques that a Scrum Master could employ or could bring up in order to help team members. So one of the techniques is what is called the Boy Scout rule. And what is the Boy Scout rule? Always leave the campground cleaner than you found it, regardless of who made the mess. Right, every time you are in an area of code doing work, always leave the code a little cleaner, not a little messier than you found it. So this is a one way of suggesting or encouraging team members to collaborate and work together. And you could see this technique or suggest or encourage this technique when you introduce what is called pair programming, where two developers are working on the code. One is writing the code, the other one is doing the reviewing. So Boy Scout rule is when you encourage team members to keep whatever they are doing cleaner than they see it. All right. 10th one is what is called the burn down chart. The burn down chart is a graph that shows on the vertical axis the quantity of work. In other words, hours or story points remaining over time, which is shown on the horizontal axis. Right. So what that means in a nutshell is there are key metrics, there are metrics or KPIs where a Scrum Master could be able to measure the progress of the team members, how much work they have accomplished within the sprint. So the burn down chart gives us that graphical representation of how much they have burnt, how much effort has been exhausted so far, over time. In other words, what has been accomplished and what is remaining. We have another one called the burn-up chart, which is a graph that shows the progress of work towards a goal line associated with a value on the vertical axis. So what that means is as the burn down chart is burning down, the burn-up chart gives us, going up, right? So it's just vice versa. Cadence, in other words, rhythm. Team members need to have a predictable rhythm, a regular rhythm, how they perform their work, right? For example, 2-week sprints. Every 2 weeks or every week, they have a sprint backlog refinements, right? So if they can maintain such a rhythm, it is called a cadence. Capacity, the quantity of resources available to perform useful work, right? So during the sprint planning, capacity, having a team capacity is one way that Scrum Masters can make sure that team members can accomplish and then maintain a particular velocity, which I'm going to explain later. Capacity is who is available, how much resource, in other words, human resource, who is going to available, what are the vacations in there, emergencies, in such a way that they can know how much effort that is going to be involved throughout that iteration. Ceremony. Ceremony could also be associated with activity, but ceremony is a ritualistic, symbolic activity that is performed on well-defined occasions. For example, the spring planning. Like I said, there are lots of ceremonies or activities that happen or events. So it's either you call it activity or you call it events or you call it ceremony. So these are the kind of all those rituals that happen in the process of sprint execution or where the team members are working on a particular sprint, right? Like the daily stand-up is a ceremony, right? The sprint planning is a ceremony. Sprint review is a ceremony, and likewise sprint retrospective. Chickens. This is a metaphor that is used. I use it as a Scrum Master that is used among team members, right? There is a metaphor used by Scrum team to refer to people outside of the team. So it demonstrates involvement and commitment, right? There is a popular joke saying that in a ham and eggs breakfast, the chicken is involved, but the pig is committed. So this metaphor is used to demonstrate who is involved in a sprint and who is just committed, right? The team members, the Scrum team members, by that I mean the PO, the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the developers are committed, right? So while the project manager, for example, or the any of the stakeholders is also a chicken because they are not committed for that sprint, but they are involved. They can make a contribution, but they are not actually the people doing the actual work. So it is a metaphor used to demonstrate or give us that idea of who is doing what on a project. Okay, so commitment, the act of binding oneself to a course of action in both good and bad times. The team is bound to meeting the collective goal. So as far as the sprint has started, the team members are committed. They are bound by the efforts they said they're going to commit for that sprint. So if, for example, myself as John Bosco, I said, okay, I'm going to commit on 10 hours for a particular user story. So I'm bound to be able to follow up and live up to that expectation in order to demonstrate trust. Okay, so just to draw us a little bit backwards again, if this is your first time of visiting my channel, please click the subscribe button and then the notification button so that you can always get notification whenever I release a new content. I do release contents twice in a week, Mondays and Friday. Um, Please like and then share with your friends, colleagues, family members, and then let people know about what I do. I'm also available if you want to take or engage in Scrum class. Please visit my website at www.ineedscrummaster.com. And then I can be able to meet with you. If you want to email me, you can contact me at info@ineedscrummaster.com, and then we can schedule, or you can also go to the website and schedule a time, and then I can be able to meet with you. Okay, so that's a little bit commercial break there. Thank you. All right, let's keep going. Complex domain. A situation in which things are more unpredictable. So there are times where you can't foresee, right, things. So in other words, it's seen as a complex domain. Component team. Right. So one thing that you or most people don't really get is there are two types of team members. You have the component team members and you have the feature team members. So this is so explanatory, but I'm going to just give a little bit insight on that. And what do I mean? What does it mean to say this is a component team? Contrast to a feature team, it is a team that focuses on the creation of one or more components of a larger product. Just like in the creation of a user story, it is all categorized or grouped together under Epic. So components means people who are working on the um, let's say on the main elements of the requirements. Conditions of satisfaction is the condition under which a PO will be satisfied that the product backlog item is done. So you can also, I mean, it's quite so difficult to associate this condition of satisfaction to definition of done, right? But this is a little bit different. So the PO is an authority when it comes to the backlog. The PO owns the product backlog. So he or she sets out the conditions that will be met before an item will be said to be done. Okay, continuous delivery / deployments. Right, so if you are kind of very familiar with Azure DevOps, so you must have come across this concept, continuous delivery, continuous deployments. What does that mean? Deploying each feature or each new feature to users immediately as it is built, integrated, and tested on a continuous basis. As things are developed, they are really deployed, delivered to the end user. Continuous integration, a technical practice where members of a single team or multiple teams integrate their work as frequently as is practical, right? It's just like testing and then just like the testing and the building are being, merged together, right? So everything happen at the same time, right? Just like the left hand and the right hand are in communion in order to be able to produce a visible or tangible value. Okay, cross-functional team. What that means is every Scrum team is encouraged to be cross-functional. You should have all of the skills required to work on a project or in a sprint, right? You need to have designers, developers, testers, all of the specialties. That is what it means to be cross-functional. Sign-off-in. So just to explain this, which is going to be another of my contents later on this channel. There are times where Scrum might not be the appropriate framework to work on a project. Scrum does not work in every environment. Scrum does not work, might not work for every team. Scrum might not be the best framework, might not be the best solution in order to resolve issues or tackle a problem, right? So what do I mean by sign-off-in? A sense-making framework that helps to understand the situation in which it is necessary to operate and decide on how best to approach it. What that means is, if you have an issue, sign-off-in is an approach where you can decide, brainstorm, argue, debate. How do you tackle this? What is the best methodology to resolve that issue? That is called a sign-off-in. Daily stand-up, daily Scrum. right? So this is one of the Scrum ceremonies. You have the daily stand-up, you have the sprint planning, you have the sprint review, you have the sprint retrospective. So daily stand-up is a 15 minutes meeting that the team members have every day, time box, nothing more than 15 minutes. It could be lesser, right? It's a way where they inspect and adapt, where they kind of trying to, to keep each other's in check. Okay, deep. Is an acronym coined by Roman Pillar and Mike Cohn for remembering a set of criteria used to evaluate the quality of product backlog. So this is one of the techniques a Scrum Master could introduce collaborating with the PO in order to make sure that the items in the product backlog are well refined. What does D is an acronym, meanwhile? So it's D means detailed, E means emergent, another E means estimated, and then prioritize, right? The items or the user story should be detailed enough that we have enough information. Emergent in such a way that change, we can always, wiggle things in between. Estimated, we should be able to size it up. Prioritize, we should be able to, give that hierarchy. What is what is at the top? What is at the middle? What is at the bottom? In other words, the critical, the medium critical, and then the low critical. Definition of done, right? Before team members or Scrum team can say they have finished or they have completed a task or a user story, it has to go through a checklist again. Remember when we talked about acceptance criteria? So the definition of done is a checklist of the types of work that the team is expected to successfully complete by the end of each sprint. The PO has the authority again to decide if a story has been completed, if a story is done. Okay, definition of ready. If you understand what definition of done is, so it is quite easy to understand definition of ready. Before team members, Scrum team, or developers can start working on a task, it has to be said to be ready. So ready means it has gone through the acceptance criteria. I mean, we have sized it up, and then we can say, okay, now we are ready to start working on this. Development team. So we have basically three Scrum roles. You have the PO, the product owner, you have the Scrum Master, and you have the developers, which is called the development team, right? So this is a self-organizing team that that they are the ones that do the actual work. Dot vaulting. It is a technique that a Scrum Master could introduce, where participants or developers can demonstrate their preference, right? Their preference. So because I don't have the Scrum board, I would have demonstrated what that means. So in other words, if you are in actual physical environment where you have your board, right? So let's say, for example, the developers are deliberating on how much or what is the duration of each sprint. Let's say, is it 1 week sprint or 2 week sprint, 3 weeks or 4 weeks, right? So they go to the board and then they say, okay, if you want 1 week, you should be able to, put 1 dot. If you want 2 weeks, just like that. So it's a way for them to demonstrate their preference. Emotions seismograph is a graphical representation of the emotional ups and downs of team members over the course of a sprint. So I do one thing, I do encourage, or I have introduced over the years a technique where the emotions of my team members could be measured, right? So these guys are actually, doing a lot of stuff. Their brain is working around the clock. So how do I make sure that their health, their mental health is also in check? So we do have an hour section where we kind of not doing any technical work, but just to keep us in check about how we are dealing with some of the work and even our work-life balance. Okay, Epic. Epic is a large body of work that can be broken down into small pieces called user stories. In other words, epic is like the main element, like the huge block of work to be worked on, right? Before it could be broken down. Team members do not work on epics. Epics it takes months to work on. So you wouldn't want your team members to work on epics. Rather, you break it down into smaller pieces called user stories. Estimation, right? It's giving a rough calculation of how much time, effort is going to require to work on a particular story. External stakeholders. So we have basically two types of stakeholders. We have the external stakeholders, we have the internal stakeholders, but I'm going to explain internal stakeholders later on in another broadcast. Today, we're looking at external stakeholders. These are the sponsors. These are the customers. These are the ones who are bringing the project to the developers. So these are the external stakeholders. Extreme programming. Basically, extreme programming just another of Agile framework, just like we have Scrum, we have Kanban, we have Lean. So extreme programming is just another of Agile framework. Okay, fail fast. How do you, there are different ways a Scrum Master, an excellent Scrum Master, wants to get the team members to, get their hands on a project. So fail fast is the strategy of trying something, getting fast feedback, right? So sometimes team members might shy away or, not contributing or being active in each of the ceremonies. So you need to make them to, be active, right? Even if they make a mistake, let them learn from the mistake. So let them fail fast and then let them get on their feet again. Fast feedback is a principle that states that feedback today is much more valuable than the same feedback tomorrow. So we want to make sure that we are getting feedback as soon as possible, depending on how fast we are delivering to the client. And you can mostly get that if you are working on shorter sprint duration, let's say 2 week sprints or even 1 week. In other words, you're always delivering to the client and you can capture feedback as you go by. Feature, a slice of business functionality that is meaningful to a customer or user. Just look at feature as a functionality. For example, you have your self mobile phone, right? You know, clicking the call button could be a feature, right? So it's just a slice of whatever value that you're delivering or functionality that you're delivering to the customer. Feature team. Remember when I talked about component team? So the feature team is another of the two types of teams, right? So it's a cross-functional team that can pull in customer features. So these are the guys who actually work on the functionalities, right? The component team work on the main elements, while feature team work on the functionalities. That's the simple explanation there. The other one is fixed date release. It's just a fixed time where a particular feature should be released to the end user. Fixed scope release, a release that must have a specific set of features, very self-explanatory. Flow, right? The smooth, steady movement of work through the development process to ensure that good economic value is delivered. For example, if you have seen the Jira board before, you have different columns, right? You have the to-do column, you have the in progress, you have the done column. So the flow means how work is the movement of one item or one feature user story from one column to the other, right? Okay. Forecast, making statements, prediction, or estimation about events whose actual outcomes have not yet been observed. It's like making a prediction, right? So we are forecasting. For example, you hear that we are having a forecast meeting where team members or even the PO and then project managers or even product managers can sit down and then look at how much budget, what is the budget of a project, or how much releases is going to require to complete a particular project. So that is kind of a forecast. Happened upon technical depth. There are different types of technical depths, right? So one of them is happened upon technical depth. It means a status category for technical depth that represents depths that the development team was unaware existed until it was exposed during the normal course of performing the work on a product. What is technical depth? In other words, ability to ship fast, sorry. Excuse me there. A technical depth is the ability where team members want to ship fast to the clients. In other words, not able to work on all of those functionalities. So the depth means you are owing something. So we want to ship fast to the clients, right? But we want to go back and then be able to fix all of the things we left behind, right? So happened upon is where the team members were not aware about something that they were working on during a particular sprint. Impediment is either you hear impediment or blocker, hindrance. This is something that is really obstructing the progress of a sprint or obstructing developers working on a particular, working on a project or in an iteration. And the Scrum Master is primarily responsible in removing impediments. You want to spare some time for your team members to keep working on a project, so the Scrum Master is required to remove whatever impediments or blockers that the developers are encountering. Okay, implementable story, a user story that is sized small enough to fit nicely within a sprint, right? Something that the developer can work on within a sprint is called implementable story. Incremental development, development based on the principle of building some before building all. So we want to work on the small pieces before we can work on the main elements. Inspect and adapt. Like I said before, you will hear this often and on. There are different ways developers inspect and adapt. For example, during the daily stand-up, they just want to make sure that they are moving towards the sprint goal. So, or is a process of making sure that they are flexible, they can be able to wiggle things in between. So inspecting and adapting, just checking up, right? Okay, inspection, one of the 3 pillars of Scrum involving thoughtful examination. We want to examine and making sure that we are moving or we are on course rather than off course. Internal stakeholders. So you remember when I talked about the external stakeholders? So these are members of the company, right? For example, the senior executives, managers, right? These are internal stakeholders. Invest is also an acronym. The first acronym we talked about here was DEEP, D-E-E-P. This is another acronym again you will see in Scrum, an acronym coined by Bill Weck for remembering a set of criteria used to evaluate the quality of user stories. The criteria include independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. You mostly hear this acronym, concerning items in the backlog, right? And also, as a Scrum Master, there are different ways and techniques you could use to support the product owner. So this is another technique you could use to support and refine items in the backlog. Iteration. You mostly hear sometimes Scrum Masters are called iteration managers, right? Iteration is another word, sprints, a self-contained development cycle, right? Cycle. So iteration means cycle. That's why you hear 2-week sprints, 1-week sprints, 3-week sprint, and even 4-week sprints. So cycle, the cycle where developers work on a project, just in time, JIT. A characteristic of process where the activities of a work stream become available or occur just as they are needed. Oh, this is just in time, right? So we have completed this story just in time, as when required. Good. Kanban. This is another of Agile framework, right? We have talked about sprint programming. So this is another of Agile framework. Sometimes you may hear Kanban, or somebody might ask you, oh, what is the framework the team members are using to work? You say, oh, we are using Scrum, or we are using Kanban, or we are using sprint programming. Sometimes team members can even do a combination of 2 frameworks. That's why you can hear things like Scrumban, that is Scrum and Kanban, or even Scrum SP, which is Scrum and sprint programming. Okay. Non-technical depth. So now, before we talked about hands-on technical depth, so another of technical depth is non-technical depth. It is a status category for technical depth that represents the depth that is known. The other one was where they are not aware, but this is they are aware of it. So they're going back. The developers are going back in order to to work on that depth. Learning loop. Learning, loop means learning as they go. Feedback. Okay. Minimum marketable features, MNF. The small minimum set of functionality related to a feature that must be delivered for the customer to perceive value. So it is different from minimum viable products, right? So this is a different thing altogether. Minimum releasable features, MRF. The minimum set of features that must be present in a release. It's self-explanatory. In each of the release, what is the minimum feature that must be there? And by release, I mean when it could, people have this debate about what is a release or when is a go live. As far as you are shipping, right, you are making it something available to the clients or to the end user. Minimum viable product, MVP. A product has just a product that has just those features that allow the product to be deployed. Okay. Musketeer attitude, one for all for one. This is a technique where you can encourage your team members to collaborate and work as a team rather than as an individual. We win as a team. We fail as a team. Must have features, right? This is like something that is compulsory. It must be available in a release. Naive technical debt, another type of technical debt. Like I said, there are different types of technical debt. So if you're not sure how many types of technical debt, you are having that today. All right, so what is a naive technical debt? A form of technical debt that accrues due to irresponsible behavior or immature practices on the part of the people involved. Sometimes there might be some oversight because of inexperience of a developer. That's naive. Okay, nice to have features. We could have this feature, right? So it is different from must have. Must have, it is compulsory that we have it. Nice to have features that are targeted for the upcoming release, but could be excluded depending on how things go. There are times that team members might tool them because of availability of funding. So that's nice to have, could be, eliminated from that. Parking lots. Okay, so parking lots is a place and opportunity for the Scrum team to discuss heavyweight subjects. Okay, by heavyweights, there are things that might not really avail the team members to discuss within a daily stand-up. So the Scrum Master, during the daily stand-up, the Scrum Master, the discussion centers on what did the developer work on yesterday? What are you hoping to work on today? If there is any blocker. So anything that is outside of these three categories could be discussed in the parking lot. It's just a meeting right after the daily stand-up where issues can be ironed out in detail. Persona, a fictitious person that is the prototypical instance of a person user role. So you mostly see this when drafting out the user story, like as a XYZ, wants XYZ in order to XYZ. So the persona is who has the role in each of these instances, like as a XYZ. That is a persona there. Okay. Plan-driven process. So the plan-driven process, in other words, is just to explain waterfall, right? Where you have a laid down or sequential approach to work on projects. Okay, so because of time, like I said, I'll try as much as I can to keep us within a time frame. Like I said, I have over 126 concepts and terminologies that I've compiled, that I have researched about, that is most common among team members, Scrum team, or even Agile, right? So even if you are new to Scrum, by looking at this, you will be able to catch up and learn very fast. Even if you are already a professional Agile coach or Scrum Master, I believe you will also learn some of these concepts as they come by. All right, so if you have questions, please don't fail to reach out, drop your comments in there, email me, like, subscribe, share. Let us learn among each other. If you want to discuss each of these concepts that I have shared with you today, please reach out to me. We can schedule a time to meet. If you're looking for a place to start your experience or your journey as a Scrum Master, as an Agile coach, visit www.ineedscrummaster.com, and then you will be able to connect. Some of my students are all over the place, or even if you are in different continents, different country, technology has made it easier for us to meet virtually, and then we can be able to do that. It's a 6 weeks class, and then I will guide you through the process and the do's and the don'ts. But for today, I thought we should just look at the first section about the terminologies about on Scrum or Agile. I believe by having these terminologies, you can be able to follow through on the discussion setting about Scrum and Agile. I hope you find today's discussion quite enriching. That's where we're going to stop for today. Otherwise, I will see you again next time. I hope you have a good time. Bye for now.